because they've accepted that this just is how it is. Some people are just going to be homeless. Some people just don't have enough food to eat. I'm just going to go about my day. And that's just unacceptable. And that's why we need to continue doing these protests, doing these rallies, organizing, agitating, activating. I love seeing the Sunrise activists at Joe Manchin's yacht. I think those are the types of things we need to do. If we can't be comfortable in our home, if we can't afford to eat and sit down and have a meal, then they shouldn't be comfortable to do so either. And we are not going to affect change unless we make them feel the pressure. So we need to not only get involved, but we also need to continue agitating out in the streets. I am not an absolutist in the sense that we only need to vote. That's our only solution. Nor do I feel that voting doesn't matter and we only need to go to streets organizing. I think we need to do both. We need to keep the pressure on in the streets. And then, like what I plan to do in May before the primary. The primary is June 7th, 2022 here in California. So for the entire month of May, we're going to be doing a Get Out the Vote, where we're going to be holding rallies and information sessions in every city. And we're going to have a little conga line or something where we march to the actual outside ballot box where they can put it in, or we can meet up and drive people to their polling places. But
I ain't gotta maintain my image in person, cause I am the same guy. I ain't walking in your shoes, but I do stand beside him. Another story on the news, talking about how another cop shot him. What's the world really come?
Welcome, everyone. This is episode 42 of UnCommon Conversations. We have a returning guest, none other than Daniel Wilson. He is not your average conservative, not your average progressive. He's definitely not your average conservative either.
Right.
He obviously is someone who no doubt has progressive values and is fighting for many great causes and cares about the people. But unlike many on his side, he's willing to reach across the aisle for solutions if you agree with him in terms of the principles and the values and the goals he is aiming for. He's a veteran, and he is going to be campaigning for state assembly here in California, trying to change the Golden State from within, make us get up to the golden standard once again. And I'd like him to break down what his mission is all about. So, Daniel, please take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jordan, for that awesome introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Daniel Wilson. I'm running for California State Assembly in the western portion of Ventura County. It's Assembly District. It finally has a number now. The preliminary numbers and the maps have been released. Final ones to come soon in the next 2 weeks. But current numbers stand at West Ventura County is going to be Assembly District 38. You can go to my website, votefordaniel.com, to check out more information about my issues, sign up to volunteer, contribute if you can. The biggest thing that I saw was, and so if you've watched Jordan's show before and you've seen me on here, last time we talked, I was actually running for Congress. And there's a lot of issues happening nationally. And I've spoken to many candidates who are actually dealing with the exact same thing that I was running into, where either they're being cut out of the district that they had already been running and campaigning in, or being put into a district where there's already another progressive or another, like-minded candidate that they would want to support and not run against. They're changing the numbers. Here in Ventura County, what's happening is there's a 50 to 100,000 vote swing expected based off the party lines. And so the viable path was no longer there, and there was another couple candidates that might have been thrown into the race. And so for a variety of reasons, mostly just the gerrymandering that's happening throughout the state of California, as is happening in Texas and in other places, it made it an untenable position and unviable to continue pursuing the congressional race. While I'm not in it to win it for the sake of to be a career politician, it does have to be a likelihood. You've got to look at your odds and the chances of winning. How much good am I going to be able to do continuing to run in a race that I can't win when I could redirect and look at some other ways? And so I started thinking about state assembly. And initially, a lot of the issues, as you can see behind me, Medicare, climate, education, these are big national issues. And while nothing in California here is perfect, I know that we have it really good here compared to a lot of the states in our country. And I wanted to expand those opportunities and that better standard of living and quality of life where, we as voters have already voted for $12 an hour minimum wage. We've already voted to legalize cannabis while we still need to do work on the justice reform on that, so we've already gone forward in a lot of ways where some of the other the rest of our country has been held back. So my initial thought was, I've got to take this national. I have to do these big national policies. After running into these roadblocks and starting to look into what my options were for running for assembly, a lot of things clicked into place. One, if gerrymandering has been an issue nationally for a very long time, our representatives have had ample opportunity to end it at a national level, to put in an amendment to the Constitution, or just create a federal regulation making it illegal, and have failed to do so. So let's redirect. So let's go here in California. Let's go to the California state legislature and pass it here and end gerrymandering here in California, and kind of be the example to roll out something like that, either state by state, or to create a national legislation to protect the interests of the voters, to make sure that we aren't being squeezed out for the interests of the politicians. There's an interesting clip, and I wish I had prepared it. I will send it to you later, of where it's acceptable if a politician comes out and says, we're not gerrymandering to cut voters out, we're just gerrymandering to make sure the partisan map works. You're still gerrymandering. Right, and when you're gerrymandering to make sure that this incumbent wins over, a potential competitor, that's antithesis of democracy. It should be based off population, community status, tax bracket, the tax districts, the education districts, water districts. Like, there's a lot of other things that should be taken into account. Partisanship and your ability to win a next election should have nothing to do with how our lines are drawn. So we can make those changes here at the state level. And once that clicked, and once that ball started rolling, minimum wage, like I said, we passed here 12 years ago. Congress is dragging its feet. There's gridlock. They can't get along, can't agree on anything. I saw final news today that, Manchin's put the final nail in the coffin. He refuses to vote on the Build Back Better. And we can get into the details of that. I don't agree with everything on that bill, but if we can't even get them to vote on the most watered down version of nothingness, what are we going to have how are we going to get bigger legislation? So again, we've got $12 an hour here. That was years ago. Now we can fight for 20, set the standard, set the bar. We are fighting for CalCare right here. Medicare for All has been dead on the national stage. It's got more popularity, more momentum than it's ever had, but it's still, with our current leadership, speakers of the House and Senate, it's never going to go anywhere. So we can do CalCare right here. CA is going to lead the way, and I've been championing that since January, since CalCare hit the books. It's AB 1400 for anybody that'd like to look into it. It would be California guaranteed single-payer health care. It's a fantastic piece of legislation. They're already trying to fight that. Totally off topic already. But so basically the point is, everything that's been gridlocked, held up, refusing to get passed in Congress and in federal legislation, we can do here in California. And second backup plan, if we can't get our state legislature to get off their ass and pass this ballot initiative, these ballot measures that the people are clamoring for, we've got 60, 70, 80% voter approval on these things, then we write a petition, we create a state ballot initiative, and we take it directly to the people. So we've got a lot of awesome opportunities here in California to make things better where our federal legislators are dropping the ball.
I love it. I love it. That's a great way to go.
So we've got a lot of awesome opportunities here in California to make things better where our federal legislators are dropping the ball.
I love it. I love it. That's a great way to go. Let's go under the hood on a couple of those, and then we can move on to other topics. So what alternatives or potential solutions to gerrymandering or determining the ways in which we draw those district lines? Like, what are the alternatives? Because I'm not familiar with it. I do have some ideas myself I can share in a minute, but are you familiar with any potential solutions, alternatives, and what are those, and what should we do?
Yeah, so a couple things. What's interesting is that a couple things. We need to change who is being allowed to draw the lines, where they're affiliated with, and I know that right now it's supposed to be three Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 3 independent, nonpartisan on the Public Independent Districting Commission. And again, here in California, they're doing a much better job than they are in other states where there isn't even an independent redistricting commission. There isn't even a public forum for people to give their voice. So again, California is still doing better, but it's still not good enough when we can see that in several places, the lines appear to be being drawn to help or hinder certain candidates. And so I think if we set down clear rules for what has to be included and what has to be taken into account when these lines are being drawn. I think it's been too long since there's been an update to the legislation that dictates what constitutes a district, what factors have to be met, what metrics and barriers and things have to be included or considered so that we're making sure that they're hitting all those points. And then we would have to see how that would flush out, but that would be where I would start first. And that's not a perfect solution. I know that there's going to be issues and things that we're not going to think of initially. So I would say, do a pilot plan where we, for the next round, because we do this every 10 years with the census, if we trigger, if our census data triggers redistricting, which we have for the last couple, do it for the next round, see if it works, see if it comes across more equitable, and fix the bugs. That's another thing, is these solutions don't have to be perfect to any of these problems. If we at least start putting things on the books, putting things on the map to see if it's going to get better, because so often we're like, that won't fix it, or that won't work, or you can't do that. Why not? And as long as we are being equitable across the board and taking all these things into account, hearing all of the voices, doing what they're supposed to be doing right now for input for the legislation, making sure communities are being heard, I think that would be the best place that we could start to address this issue.
I love it. Yeah, very educational. Awesome. My two. So I have one proposed, I think, workable solution, and one that's just sort of a blowing the doors off of the system, the ideal abstract from everything. The first one, that's the reasonable one, is what could be called a political center mass rule, where a district, if you have like a Democrat pocket, a little Republican pocket, and another Democrat pocket, you should have one district, another district, and another district, instead of you split a political center mass of Republicans in this case in here, and you bring them into the other two to get rid of that political representation. So the center of a district, and it has to be like geographically round. It can't be like cut off and like turned into the little, if you look at the map, it's ridiculous the way they do this. But yeah, if you look at like all the Republicans in a certain area, if they are center, or if they're politically centered, or if a Democrat is or whatever, you start from that political center mass and go out until you hit that population. That's one potential thing we can do. And then the sort of abstract one would just be, you just have to get like your percentage of the overall voters in California, and you get to be one of the 23 congressmen, and it's like, the most popular one gets slot 1, the second most popular person gets slot 2, and we just have 23 Congress people we send as a whole state to Congress. That is one way. Okay. You can, at least for the national level stuff, I don't know how that works. That doesn't work at the local level, but it could be turned into county-wide, turned into city-wide, but that's sort of the principle that could work. But that's very, very, it's super complicated and novel, so I don't know if it would, you don't know how that would play out. It's very difficult to even go through that hypothetical. It's such a different way of doing it. But yeah, all right. So moving on.
Like that. Real quick, I like the first one is a great idea, because that is actually what's happening is, and whether it's political party, there's a huge Democratic mass here and a small Republican mass here, and so they split the Republicans to basically water down their votes. The same thing is happening to Black and brown communities, where they're cutting them in half, literally drawing lines right down a neighborhood, so that it waters down the vote, and it makes them where they would have had a larger voice had they been kept together. They're now watered down in two different districts, losing. So I like the center mass idea, where you shouldn't be able to just cut a line right between a city, right between communities. They should be forced to do everything in their power to make sure that at the very least cities are kept together. Like if you have to cut a hard line between two cities, okay, do it at the city line. There shouldn't be where you're in a row and you have a different district than your neighbor. Your kids go to the same school, you pay the same water board, you have the same, those communities should be kept together. So I like the center mass idea to make sure that they're not excluded. And we would have to figure out how to make the population numbers match. But the center mass idea is a good one, and I think that would go a long way to helping more people feel like their vote does matter, because it could actually have an impact. And there's other things in the electoral system that we can talk about later that we need to change that will also help people have more voice. But I like the center mass idea. That's a good one. And the other one, let me keep thinking about it, do some research. Let me know what kind of scenarios play out. It's interesting to talk about.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so the other one that we should go under the hood on is CaliCare. What are some of the principles of that, or the essential structure of how it would work? Most people, including me, are not supremely familiar with the mechanism of Medicare for All. I know generally single payer systems and how they tend to work. I know a little bit about different versions in other countries. But would Medicare for All essentially just be a universal public option? Or what would it be? If you could explain that, that would be excellent.
Absolutely. And so both Medicare for All and CalCare would be what is described as universal single payer. So what that does is that instead of, and there's a lot of misinformation about that, removing choice and removing options and forcing everybody to have a bare minimum of care. But what it really does is it eliminates a lot of the complications that we experience from, I get a referral from my doctor and they refer me here, but that doctor doesn't take my insurance, or I really want to go to this provider. I've been there my whole life, but they're changing their insurance that they take, or my job's changing the insurance. And so what a universal single payer does is it removes all of that confusion, red tape, all of the different marketplaces, all of the competition, to where, competition is supposed to make sure that nobody is overcharging, because there's going to be somebody that can undercut you. But what happens is, in this fixed marketplace where they're not actual competitors and they work in tandem with one another to raise their prices at the same time, there's false competition. And so this notion that, if we get rid of all these insurance companies, there won't be any competition. First of all, going to universal single payer will not eliminate private insurance companies. What it will do is create a universal state paid. So you still go to your doctor, you can still go to the same providers you've been going to. If you've got a family doctor, your doctor down the street, your dentist covers eyes, ears, nose, mental health, long-term care. And what happens is, and here's where the single payer comes in. You go to your doctor, you get seen for whatever it is, and then you leave. And instead of your doctor having to have 5 to 10 billing clerks that have to know 15 to 20 different insurance coding systems with different numbers and different things, where they over itemize to make sure that something that could have been charged as one thing, they have some overlapping charge because they charge you for this and that and this. And so going to single payer eliminates all of that nickel and diming. It eliminates all of that overlap, the excess and the waste, where now your doctor gets your bill, takes it to the back office, and there's maybe a handful of clerks, but those clerks aren't going to lose their jobs. We've got something for them. But they would reduce the amount of administration it would need, because they have one insurer, the government. They send the bill to the government and it's paid as long as your doctor mandates that it's something you need. Now, here's where the private insurers come in. Everybody gets this base access of care. If you live in this country, period. There should be no qualifiers on anything for you to get this care. The moment you are born in this country, you get this care until you leave this country. Everybody gets the same access to care. Now, for people who want more, who want things that are considered cosmetic surgeries, extra, not necessary procedures, and things of the like, or just, what they would consider a higher quality of care, even though we need to make sure that this baseline is still quality care. But there will be the option of private providers to provide extra, just like there is now, where you can have 2 or 3 different insurance companies because one doesn't cover something, so you have to get another one. The same thing would be possible. The only thing is you wouldn't be forced to spend money on your basic healthcare needs. And so it does not eliminate choice. It does not eliminate freedom. It actually enhances and expands it, making sure that you can go to any provider. And I had one pushback and said, well, then the providers won't have any reason to treat you well. And I said, no. That's the opposite of how capitalism and the free market works. If you get bad service from a doctor, they don't spend enough time with you. They're clearly pushing you out the door. They double book just like they do now. You are no longer captive because that's the only doctor in your area that will take your insurance. You now get to walk down the street and go to whatever doctor's office you want and make sure you're getting the best care. So it amplifies choice, it enhances your options, and the fact that it covers ears, your hearing, dental, vision, and mental health for seniors so both for CalCare and for Medicare, how they have Part A, Part B, Part C. Some of them don't cover long-term care. Some of them don't cover prescriptions. So even once you turn 65 and you hit that, golden Medicare age, you've got to take out 2 or 3 more insurance plans, even though you have that one for your prescriptions and one for any long-term or in-home care that you need. And so that is where some of the pushback comes from the older generation that is living on Medicare right now. When we say Medicare for all, and that's a problem that we can talk about branding and slogans, is that when they hear Medicare for all, they think that it's going to be what they've got now, just give it to everybody. And so we need to do a better job of informing and educating people. Just like you said, you're a California resident. This legislation, CalCare, AB 1400, has been on the books since January. Not enough people know about that and are not making enough noise, whether they like it or not. They haven't even been informed of it before or against it. And so right now, CalCare specifically has been tabled. They are using the age-old tactic of how you're going to pay for it with CalCare. So when it was introduced in January by Assembly members Ash Cowra and Lee Santiago, it was almost immediately discounted and sent to committee for investigation and further research because several members stood up and said there's no funding attached to this bill. Here's an interesting point. That pay-go mentality may be how they've convinced us that our federal legislation needs to happen. We can have another debate about that. But that is not how our California legislation process goes. They submit a bill, it's voted on, or it's sent through committees. When it comes out of the committee, it's voted on. And if it passes, then they decide how we're going to fund it. So that's our normal legislation process, is it goes through, and then later, if we decide, yes, this is a bill, that's something the Californians need that we're going to put forth, then we make sure we have the funding for it. So they're already using well-known age-old tactics that have been used to discount and disarm and dismantle the Medicare for All argument and movement for decades, was rampant and immediately reared its head against CalCare. But the bottom line is, and you asked me specifically for the principles of CalCare. Universal coverage, everybody in, nobody out, regardless of race, sex, gender, country of origin, disability status, immigration, marital status, age, income, gets the care they need regardless of the ability to pay. Single payer, publicly funded through progressive taxation to cover all necessary care in California, and I'll have some more answers for that too. Eliminating billions in bloat and waste and saving people thousands on their healthcare costs. Fully comprehensive benefits, as I said, medical, dental, hearing, vision, mental health, long-term care. All decisions based on care would be made between you and your doctors and nurses, not because your insurance company said that they won't cover something. The freedom to choose your care provider, I said, there's no more in and out of network, HMO, PPO, EMO, whatever all those numbers mean, we never understand, or letters rather. Free at the point of service, so there's no copay, no premiums, no deductibles. Like I said, if your doctor says that you need it, it's required for your either preventative, ongoing, or too far gone. Hopefully we get out of that, but for your doctor says you need it, it is covered. And then we have already built into this program a just transition, making sure that there are funding and programs to protect and support displaced workers in the insurance and the current healthcare industry. And the bottom line, most important principle behind everybody in, nobody out is patient care based on patient need. So no more, excessive prescriptions being pushed on us because doctors might be getting a kickback every time they prescribe, unnecessary surgeries, procedures, pushing women and different types of groups to get a certain procedure that they might not have needed just because they know that they can make a buck on it. So all of that disingenuous for-profit, profiting off of suffering, all of that disingenuous motives goes away, where it's just value-based care, and the providers no longer have to worry, I can't take Medicare because I know I'm going to have to fight them for my money. They will know they're going to get paid. So other than their inability to provide a service because they just don't know that, right? Like, you can't go into an eye doctor and say, fix my foot. I can't. You still need to go down to the ear doctor or the eye doctor. But as long as their provider has the skills and the knowledge and the ability to care for you, nothing is going to stand in the way on any of that. Several good points have been made, and we've been really diving into the benefits, the cost benefit analysis, both financially and societally. And I know you're going to have some questions on that, so I'll let you lead with that.
Yeah. Have there been any estimates on the cost? Because I like to know at least what it would cost tax wise. So like, I know roughly the budget in California is about $55 for the state level is about $5,500 per citizen. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I am planning my particular policy solutions, such as universal health savings accounts, I'm like, we'll put $2,000 into every single person's health savings account. But that when I'm talking about under the hood, the health savings account mechanism is sort of what I'm after. I know in the Australian system, they have fixed compensation where you get paid a certain amount for what you do. And then there's a bonus for optimal outcome or like better outcomes. I don't understand Germany's system whatsoever yet. I know Canada has a system where basically you just go, you get the care, and then they bill the government. And so it's like private providers with government. Government's just footing the bill. I don't know how they determine or how they have price controls or how any of that works or the competition works. And then I know England or the UK has the National Health Service, which means the government's just in charge of everything. They pay and own and control the doctors and just everything from the top down. And there's different strengths and trade-offs with all those different systems. So with the CaliCare, the Medicare thing, I believe it's like we will pay a certain price for a certain service. And then the doctor, I think, has the right to like just deny you if it's not enough money for them. I don't know if that would be doable here.
So those are very good points because that's something that a lot of people don't talk about is the difference between Canada and the UK's healthcare system. Because you're absolutely right. In the UK, it's all government run. And that's what we don't want or need in this country. There are plenty of private providers. In fact, there aren't enough because they're being squeezed out by these giant conglomerates like Kaiser. That's no longer insurance. It's now its own healthcare service. And so small mom and pop doctors who, like the ones that you think of that used to make house calls on Andy Griffith, right? Those people can't survive anymore. And so we've actually, just like is happening all in every sector of our economy and society where, those are very good points because that's something that a lot of people don't talk about is the difference between Canada and the UK's healthcare system. Because you're absolutely right. In the UK, it's all government run. And that's what we don't want or need in this country. There are plenty of private providers. In fact, there aren't enough because they're being squeezed out by these giant conglomerates like Kaiser. That's no longer insurance. It's now its own healthcare service. And so small mom and pop doctors who, like the ones that you think of that used to make house calls on Andy Griffith, right? Those people can't survive anymore. And so we've actually, just like is happening all in every sector of our economy and society where, yes, we should have the free market, the ability for everybody to live the American dream, to create whatever business they want and profit off of it if there is a market and a demand for it. There's never not going to be a demand for healthcare. The problem is when these giant providers swoop in and swallow up, or the smaller providers just shut down because they can't afford to pay their bills, and with their student debt that a lot of these doctors have, and that's why we have rural medical deserts, because the doctors can't afford to pay their student debts. They're even though they're living in somewhere where there's a low cost of living. And so we end up with these medical deserts where these urgent cares and these for-profit places swoop in that jack up their rates because they're serving a gross need that nobody else is. So they know they can charge more. And so this eliminates all of that and it allows private doctors to expand more. I have actually a couple friends who their spouses were years ago in private practice, and they either had to join with other doctors or sign on to contracts to these corporatized doctors' offices and centers that were being built. And so this actually would help small doctors be able to open their own practices again, where you've got a community doctor down the street. You don't have to drive an hour to West LA to go to your Kaiser Center. So it's private doctors still just like we have right now. So it's not publicly provided healthcare. It's private doctors that's publicly paid for. And so there's so much talk about raising taxes for this, but in reality, both on the federal and here at the state level, we wouldn't actually need to raise taxes. Now, there is a full financial fact sheet that they've broken out because they got so much pushback about not having it. They said, fine, we're going to go do our own research and set this stuff up ahead of time. So they have started doing that and providing some answers on this. But then Justin, even in my own research and in my own communications with people, I know of many other ways where this is going to, I hope that we aren't forced into a situation where we are tricked into thinking we need to raise taxes to pay for this, because we don't. Number one, here in California, unlike most other states where they just have the government insurance, we have our own low-income insurance called Medi-Cal. And so what we would do is basically expand that. So we have a wonderful opportunity here in California where there's already a foundation and a framework that interweaves this entire state, where there are hospital centers, providers, and even because California is so big, they've broken it down where here in my region it's called Gold Coast, but it's still Medi-Cal, but they just broke it down so it was easier to manage region by region, basically. But I've been through the Medi-Cal system. I went through my entire transition on the Medi-Cal system. And while some people haven't had a good experience, I got really lucky that I came into it. I was starting my transition when a lot of things were already being approved and moved along. So I think I kind of got in at a sweet spot where I didn't have to fight a lot. But so I know the benefits of what that can do, how much money, time, and sanity it saved me. And so I know what it can do. I know it already exists. And so we don't have to start from scratch. We don't have to build an infrastructure from nothing. We just need to expand it so that there's more places available, because obviously the number of people who are going to be utilizing it is going to go through the roof compared to what is being treated right now. So we would need to build more hospitals. We will need to build more places, but Kaiser and all those places can still exist. They just aren't going to have the benefit of knowing that if you don't go with them, you're going to get fined because you don't have insurance, right? These insurance companies are still going to exist. We're not going to ban or outlaw Kaiser and all these insurance companies. They're just going to have to compete with the government. And so to your question that you asked earlier, or the point you brought up about pricing, that has been another conversation, not about tax pricing, but, and I didn't fully answer that question. I'm getting sidetracked. Pricing needs to be doctors and medical professionals, nurses unions, and places like that need to be involved in at not setting the prices themselves on some kind of board. They need to have a seat at the table, because we don't want the government undercutting these doctors to where they can't survive and they can't pay their bills, because that is a problem as well. And everybody that is championing this program, it is first and foremost actually led, besides by the authors, by CNA, California Nurses Association. So nothing in this bill would hurt doctors or nurses. It's going to make sure that they have the funding they need, the PPE that they need, the safe staffing laws that they need, so that they're not overworked, underpaid, and which leads to all kinds of other complications, because you're not getting adequate care if your doctors are stressed out, overworked, and underslept. So with I hope we do not have to go, I hope we're not tricked into thinking and being forced to include a tax increase in this bill. Because I think if they're forced to add an amendment that would include a tax increase to this bill, it's going to be harder to get passed. Because the reality is we don't need it. Just one city budget alone, and I can't remember, this was just shared with me the other day, I believe it was Simi Valley City Council, that a local community member fighting for it was actually SB 862 at the time, years ago. That was the state ballot initiative for single payer that failed. This was before Bernie, though. We've had a lot of momentum since then. But they were sharing that they went to the city council and they were trying to get them to pass a resolution. It was a recent one they did, trying to get them to pass a resolution in favor of CalCare. And they said, well, this isn't a state, we can't vote on this. Why would we pass a resolution? And what we're doing statewide is trying to get all city councils to pass a resolution in favor of it, so that that'll put pressure on the legislator saying, hey, at the city council level, everybody supports this. Why aren't you doing it? And so in that research, in these meetings with the city council, this person did her research and found out that that city alone was spending $4 million on the healthcare for its employees. That's just one moderately sized city, but that's just one city in California. That's just one governmental body. That doesn't include the police. That doesn't include the fire departments. That doesn't include social work. Amplify that, just one city. So that's just $4 million that we would be saving them, that they now get to redirect, right, into community education, whatever. Or we can split the difference. Okay, you get $2 million to do this. You submit $2 million of that to us to go towards paying for the CalCare, right? There's already ways where we're putting this money out that it just needs to be redirected. Now, one of my biggest arguments is on the national stage for Medicare for All, we just need to stop subsidizing COBRA. We don't quite have that issue here in the state of California, but as I said, we've already got the Medi-Cal system. We can just expand that. So we've already got funding going into this program. If we make sure that the federal agents or the state agencies all the way down to school board and whatnot, they no longer have to put out of their budget for the healthcare, then we have all this money to utilize. And there's a very, very thorough outlined thing, as well as the one important factor is there's an ability to apply for, there's existing public health funding through the federal government that represents close to 40% of all direct healthcare spending in the state. To capture federal healthcare dollars in a state single payer system, states can obtain waivers for administering healthcare programs paid for with federal funding. So that's another way, is we also apply for waivers and federal grants that help offset. So if there's not one, there's two, there's three or four ways to pay for this that does not include raising taxes. If that happens, it'll still settle out and come out in the wash. But my stance is we absolutely don't need to raise taxes to pay for this at all. So if you lay out between Medi-Cal, that we're already putting money towards all of this healthcare services that we're paying for government employees and at the city level and all that stuff. And you just talk about the fact that, the way you would say it is, California is spending enough money. We have the money. We're already spending it. You don't need more taxes. You just need to put the money we're spending into the right areas. And that's absolutely true. Our budget this year is $217 billion at the state level. So we certainly have the money. Absolutely.
We certainly have the money. And
boils down to choices. It boils down to choices where we choose to put our money, where we choose to approve them to set up new oil rigs when we're supposed to be reducing all of that stuff. It's choices that our state legislature and our governor are making. against the interest and the will of the people.
Yeah, the only question I have, and I think it's just a lack of understanding, or it just doesn't matter, because we sort of, if you just accept that government spending is going to be wasteful and you're like, that's built in, we're just going to deal with that, then my question doesn't even matter. But the question of like, how are prices determined? How do you make sure people are getting, the service providers and goods providers are getting their fair compensation, but they're not taking advantage of the system and milking the taxpayer? And alternatives, or sort of off the alternative routes to helping our healthcare, is having like money put aside as a block grant of $100,000 to help doctors pay their medical school debt. And it's like, if you come in from another state to California, we'll give you $100,000 towards your medical debt and everything like that. And then that would, for 10 years or whatever of service here, where you promise to come and do that.
That's a wonderful idea. That's a wonderful idea. And so, to your first question, absolutely, it does matter. So yes, to some extent, until we completely adopt like the Lean Six Sigma process, which I would love to talk to you about too. I've just been introduced to it a long time ago, but then again recently, and it's an efficiency program and process that streamlines everything. And so that's what it's interesting, is that's what CalCare is going to do anyway. Like I said, instead of having 100 different coders, 100 different bills, 100 different places for you to go and having to know all this stuff and nickel and diming and everything, it's boom, it's one code for every doctor. And that's another thing, is continuity of care will also be improved, because they'll all be using the same systems. They'll be able to communicate. Your eye doctor can look in and see that you're having this problem that they would never have detected was causing an eye problem, right? Like, so there's a continuity of care, making sure that we're doing preventative. That's another thing. Just taking it from a sick care system that just, thrives on the profiting off of the sickness and the suffering of people, where they need you to get bad so that they can charge you more money. So when your diabetes goes out of control, they get more money for an amputation. And then all the things that you're going to need for the rest of your life to survive as an amputee, right? It's a constant, perpetual profit system, where if we turn it into a preventative healthcare system and you get the care you need, you can afford, you have your insulin because it's not $300 a month to make sure that you stay alive. And you can turn around and make sure that then you have the proper diet, all of these things, then we're going to have less people needing these super extreme things. So there's also a reduced cost and